Very good. Well, welcome everyone. Happy Tuesday. Thank you for being here. We are the New Mexico Minority Business Development Agency. Happy to provide more webinars on topics that you all have questions around. So today we're very grateful that we have Law for Small Business and we have partner Larry Donahue, who's going to be sharing on a very exciting topic about conflict and disputes, business partnership disputes, and how to cope and handle. So again, this is going to be recorded, so feel free to, just pay attention, and you can always go back to our YouTube channel within the New Mexico Minority Business Development Agency to rewatch it as many times as you like, or send it to your friend that's having trouble with their business right now. So thank you everyone for your time, and I'll pass it over to Larry.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the Minority Business Development Agency for letting me do this. And it's a really interesting topic, believe it or not. And it's one of those topics that we all hope we don't have to ever really think about. And that is, business partnerships and disputes and what you do about them. Here's the dirty little secret about us business lawyers. It's a substantial portion of our revenue. And the reason being is they turn into nightmares. These business disputes are just nightmares. And I'm going to explain why. And the goal here is for you, hopefully, to learn from it. And if you're already in a partnership and there's not a lot you can do about it, maybe you can work towards improving the partnership or improving your documents or doing other things to help reduce the risk and exposure to the business and your finances if, heaven forbid, there is a problem down the road. But business partnerships are a huge problem for a lot of businesses in the state. And any rate, my name is Larry Donahue. I'm a lawyer, business lawyer in the state of New Mexico. I'm also licensed in Illinois in the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I've been a lawyer for about 30 years, 31 years, somewhere in that range. And I'm the managing partner for two legal brands in the state of New Mexico, Law for Small Business and Business Law Southwest. We have about 13 lawyers, and probably 40% of our revenue comes from business partnership issues, mostly disputes and fights and so on. And so we're going to talk about that. And I have a lot of stories to tell, nightmare stories. Hopefully they'll never happen to you, but it's really crazy. You think of terrible divorces, and that's just getting started with potential partnership disputes. So we're going to talk about bad partnerships and what can possibly happen with that. And I'm going to help you understand how to choose partners wisely. I think some people actually choose their spouses more carefully than they choose business partners. And it really, in my opinion, should be the other way around. We're going to talk a little bit about what goes into a good contract for a partnership agreement, and then how to avoid disputes. And then, heaven forbid, if you do have a dispute with your partner, what you can do about and how to handle it. And then finally, how to call it quits and when to know to call it quits. And we're going to discuss all of that within the next, 55 minutes. And I'd encourage anybody participating, if you have questions, submit them to the chat, or you can do in the Q&A. I love a dynamic audience where I can answer questions on the fly. And if you don't want to answer or ask questions now, but you want to get a hold of me later, I'll have my contact information at the back of this presentation. Also, if you want a copy of the presentation, you can ask, and we will certainly send it to you with, no cost. We'll send you the PDF, so you don't need to take notes. Just pay attention. I know that's hard to do right after lunch. If you're like me, I get the food coma. Any rate, let's start off by asking some hypotheticals. And the first hypothetical is, let's assume you have a business partner and they die or become incapacitated. Do you have a formal mechanism to deal with that? What happens if your partner wants to do something or does something that's illegal or forges your name or signature on loan documents? I actually had a conversation with somebody about that just yesterday. And all of these, by the way, are real situations I've had to deal with within the past few years or even more recently. But what happens if one of your partners or the partner is a narcissist or violent or threatens you or physically attacks you? What would you do? What happens if a partner locks the doors or tries to remove you or removes you from bank accounts or tries to kick you out of the company or push you out or do other activities to try and remove you from the company? What happens if they steal from the company or they lose, let's say you're a contractor and they lose their contractor's license, or they're a doctor and they lose their medical license? What happens if they're an embarrassment or liability to the company? They're out there driving drunk, for example, or you know them to be a substance abuser of some sort. What do you do then? New Mexico has, of course, passed the cannabis, laws, recreational cannabis, and that's great. I'm not knocking it, but it's still potentially can be abused, and it can still stand in the way of doing a good job for your business. Do you have a partner or a problem with that possibly? And if so, what might you do about that? Does your partner insist on hiring unacceptable friends or family, or are they disinterested or disengaged or just not participating in the business some way, or they're not pulling their own weight, or the company needs money and they're not contributing funds? I mean, doesn't this all sound like just nightmare situations? What do you do? What happens if they start a competing company or they're working for your company, but they're directing business or leads to the new company somehow? Or we've had situations where, the partnership is conducting business and doing the work, but the invoice to get paid for the revenue is coming from another company, misdirecting funds, stealing accounts receivable from the company. Or are they just an investor and they want their money back somehow? These things can devastate a business. And now I also want to make clear, when I use the word partnership, that has a different context or legal meaning or tax meaning sometimes. In my use of the word partnership here, I'm referring to any company or business that has more than one owner. So we can be talking about an LLC with several members. We can be talking about a corporation with a number of shareholders. We could be talking about a husband and wife team partnership that doesn't have any corporate or formal structure to it whatsoever. And, at the end of the day, what matters is you have other folks like yourself that have some sort of ownership interest in the commercial enterprise. And it's those individuals that you have to have a really good relationship with. And they need to be good actors. They need to behave and not steal from the company. So what happens when things just go crazy? They're worse than a divorce. I mean, just think about the issues when you have partners in a company at each other's throats. People's livelihoods are at stake. The employees are involved. Their careers and jobs are potentially at risk. It's very common for a business to be the single most valuable asset somebody might own or have an ownership interest in. The other valuable asset would be what? The home, a house, real property, right? But sometimes you have situations where the business is even more valuable than the real estate. So you darn right, people take this stuff personally and they're going to fight tooth and nail. And if things aren't working right, they could be a disaster to work with or deal with. So it becomes a real interesting problem for partners, because you end up in this downward spiral of negativity and reprisals and retributions and getting back at somebody. And then people are devoting their energies to, proving their partner wrong or extracting vengeance instead of furthering the business and growing the business and meeting payroll and stuff like that. So it can be very difficult for partners too to know what they can or can't do. They don't know what their rights are. They don't know what the legal sort of guardrails are or are not. And you may have to make very quick, fast decisions on things. Like you have a partner taking inventory out of the warehouse. You have a drunk partner getting in a company truck. What can you do? What can't you do? These could be really difficult decisions that you have to make at a moment's notice. And if you guess wrong or do the wrong thing, it could be a potential problem. So, and this is where my last bullet here, legal assistance can be very expensive. And does everybody have a pile of cash sitting around just to spend on a lawyer to deal with a dispute you're having with somebody? Most small and medium-sized businesses in New Mexico do not. And so a partnership dispute can end up being a tremendous financial burden just on the legal side of things, let alone how you're destroying the business and creating problems for the business. So it's really important, I think, for business owners and partners to, one, choose your partners wisely and avoid bad partners. And we're going to discuss what bad partners are in a minute and how to spot them. And then to have a formalized partnership agreement with the right documents. And so we'll talk about that and what are some of the clauses. And, look, you can download these forms off the internet. The problem is, if you're going to download stuff off the internet, you really need to read them carefully to understand and make sure that you have the right clauses in them and that they accomplish the things that you need to help you avoid expensive partnership disputes down the road. So when you download something off the internet, you probably still want to get your business lawyer involved to review that and talk to you about making sure that it has everything that you need for you and your business. It's also important to actively avoid disputes, confront problems quickly, but professionally and with mutual respect. And, good partnerships, that doesn't mean confronting your partner every single time they do something that you don't like. You have to pick and choose your battles. You have to decide and make clear what you think the ultimate war is that you need to win and what battles you can maybe let slide and let go so that you don't necessarily create a war that you weren't intending. And then, once you do have a dispute, and hopefully you don't, how to effectively deal with those so they don't mushroom into something more significant. And then finally, it's important to know when it is time to throw in the towel, that the partnership isn't working, and how you dissolve or unwind the partnership correctly and effectively. So we're going to discuss all of those. And let's go into it. So let's first talk about choosing your partner wisely. And I suspect everybody watching this, you're going to know this stuff. I think we generally know when we are dealing with a problem individual. The bigger issue becomes that I think a lot of human beings are good natured. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. It doesn't matter what your nationality or religion is or your culture. We all want to think the best of the other person until, we give people the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's a great attribute. The problem is that people don't change. And so we need to, at least when we're talking about forming business relationships, not necessarily give people the benefit of the doubt so much. Listen to what people say. Watch what people do. They are telling you who they are without actually telling you directly. And you have to pay attention to those tea leaves and listen to them. Don't hope they will change. They typically will not. So let's talk about some of those tea leaves. What are the things that could sort of help you understand these kinds of people may not make great business partners? I'm not saying they won't be great friends or great travel buddies or sports buddies or something, but they're probably not going to make great business partners. And so let's talk about some of these patterns that maybe you should look at or think about. And so there's some common characteristics. Do you know people that maybe they don't work that hard, or they have large egos? They lack emotional fortitude. Now I'm going to discuss what each of these means and give you some examples. Are they takers and not givers? Or maybe they're great people, but they just can't afford to be a business partner. So they're not at that stage in their life yet to be a good partner simply because they don't have the financial capability. It's important to recognize that, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Do you know anybody that's just always the victim? Everybody's picking on them. Everybody's, poor them. They've, the last partnership they've had, the last employment, the last relationship, they're the victim. These kinds of people are going to be problems, and you need to recognize that and just stay away from them from a business partnership perspective. The big thing you need to understand is there's no law or statute that protects you from a bad business partner. It just doesn't exist. It's all on you to figure out. And so what you need to do is figure that out and hopefully don't do business with them. And then two, if you decide to do business with somebody, you need to have the right structure in place. So if something does go wrong, you can deal with that. So let's talk about the hard work for a moment. Do they avoid hard work? And it's you can see and spot some signals here. One is, are they not engaged in their current job? I'm an old fart. God, what am I now? 56, I think. And the millennials, and I'm not trying to pick on you millennials, but you know what I'm talking about here. And that is, there's this thing that was going around called quiet quitting. Like, instead of having the balls, pardon my language, to just find a new job and move on, they start doing, start being like lazy in the most passive aggressive ways possible. And that is just, I think that's just terrible. It seems really funny in TikTok, but it doesn't work well for a small business trying to meet payroll and do a good job for their customers. And so is that somebody that would, are you talking to somebody that quiet quit, or they're quiet quitting now in their job? And they're going to give you excuses like, oh, I don't like this job. I'll work really hard for you. It's like, yeah, no, don't do it. Do they habitually come in late, or do they leave early? Do they want to start? Are they telling you they want to retire? They feel like they got all this experience and they're working hard at Sandia National Labs or Los Alamos or something, but now they want to start their own partnership. They want to work less. No, when you start a business, it is as much work. And Nick says I'm still young. Thanks, Nick. I think I'm older than you, though. So I'm always going to be an older fart than you. You want to listen to them. And if they want to retire, that's great. But starting up a business with a partnership is not a place for people who want to retire. You want people to work their butts off. Do they take time, a lot of time, to return emails and phone calls or get back to you? Do they just lack a sense of urgency, especially around a business? They're probably not going to be the right partner for you. I actually I had a partnership with we tried to develop, and I can't go into too much detail, but we tried to create a subsidiary unit of the law firm focused on another area, not law. It was another area. I can't go into a lot of detail, but this individual didn't work on Fridays, called it their creative day. And, I'll admit that we lawyers kind of have a bad reputation about playing golf at 2 or 3 on Fridays. I don't, because I stink at golf. I'd like to be better at it, but can't seem to find the time. But this individual just never available on Fridays. Doesn't matter if we had an important client meeting, didn't matter if we had important deliverables, just not available because that's their creative day. I don't even know what the heck that means. They'd come back on Monday and there was no new creative anything that this individual figured out on Friday. It was just a really ridiculous way to say that they wanted to work 4 days a week. And you know what? They're entitled to work 4 days a week, but not being a partner with me when I'm working 80, 90, 100 hours a week just doesn't work out. And, if you have anybody just hinting at any of this, probably not going to work unless that's your personality as well. Then I would question, what kind of business do you guys have where nobody needs to really work that hard? And God bless you. Let me know what business that is. I'd love to move into that business myself. Let's talk about the ridiculously large ego. These are people who, what are their pronouns? Do they speak in terms of I, me, my, mine, or is it a we and an our and an us? Are they inclusive with their language? Are they quick to share, credit for the work of other people, or are they actually taking the credit themselves versus sharing credit? Are they inclusive or exclusive? Do they care a lot about vanity type things, their title, where the office is located, stuff like that. And maybe you tell yourself, oh, I can deal with that and I can live with that. But, it's kind of like, maybe there's certain types of food that, you can deal with, but if you had to eat that same kind of food, maybe too salty, you can handle, something that's a little too salty, but we humans can deal with that for a little while, but eventually it gets really old. And then eventually we start getting very resentful. And then eventually we start fighting back. But then that's months, years too late. And now we get into expensive fights. So do yourself a favor. And if somebody can't, for the love of God, recognize that they're part of a team, do you really want them as a partner? Remember, people are always their true selves when they think people aren't paying attention. So pay attention to their behavior and use the clues of their language to help you understand if you have somebody like this. And my firm would recommend you avoid large egos. And I'll tell you one thing too, large egos are really difficult to negotiate with in a settlement agreement. We've had situations where we think we finally got things resolved, partner A is going to leave and then, partner B is going to stay, but the person with a large ego is all of a sudden not happy with the deal. And now we're going to court. And now we're spending tens of thousands of dollars, with a judge and a jury. And it isn't a problem that gets resolved in a week or two. It's a couple of years. It's a horrible situation for the other partners that have to deal with somebody like that. Let's talk about emotional fortitude quickly. These are people who can't really handle criticism or constructive criticism. They don't want to be, voted out. They don't want to be, criticized. They don't want to consider other opinions. They just don't have the ability to have a friendly discussion around difficult, complex, or nuanced subject matter. And that makes it really hard, I think, in the business world, because successful businesses are those that can look at what they do, look at their people and say, are we doing things correctly? Do we have to reinvent ourselves? Guess what? Instagram is around. The yellow pages, nobody cares about the yellow pages anymore. You have to be new and fresh. You have to have good ideas and new ideas. And there's new generations of people and there's new politics that we constantly have to reorient around. Do your partners have the ability to switch and move and still hold principles and be kind and nice? Do they need just yes peoples around? I had a situation with a client where one of the partners, they couldn't have a serious conversation because they just start crying all the time. And then that partner would use that to say that the other partners were abusive and violent, and none of that was true. And so it creates this really weird dynamic that was really hard to make any decisions within that business. Do you have a taker? Somebody who takes but doesn't give. You can sniff these people out. They're always looking for free stuff. They never pick up the tab at a restaurant, or they seem to go to the bathroom once the check arrives. I've seen some of those people myself, and it's, I've actually just played a game. Usually my willingness to play a game is directly proportional to how many margaritas I've had. But there was this one time, I remember, I probably had one too many margaritas. And so I didn't touch the bill. I'm used to picking it up and handling it, and I just left it there. This person eventually comes back from the bathroom and just leaves the bill there. It's just like, it was like the battle of wills, like who's going to pick up the bill first is the one losing. And this person was playing a game with me the whole time, and I'm just trying to be polite and nice. But guess what? That person lost the ability to ever be a partner with me. I don't like playing those games unless I'm dealing with a margarita or two, but I'm only doing it because somebody was doing it to me back. That's my excuse. Anywho, are they philanthropic? Do they belong to charities? Do you know them to borrow things and not return them? I know these things seem trivial, But again, they're telling you who they are. And these aren't the kinds of people that make great partners. I promise you, especially in a partnership where they're going to demand a lot and think that they're the ones that should get paid more. They're the ones that should have, special accommodations, and you don't need it. These are the people, when we're negotiating a settlement, like you have partner A and B, and they can't work together anymore. Either A needs to buy out B or B needs to buy out A. It's that simple. So this particular partner says the following. Well, if you're going to buy me out of the company, my ownership's worth is 100 grand. You're going to have to pay me 100 grand. But if I'm going to buy you out, your ownership is only worth 10 grand. I'll pay you 10 grand for you to leave the company. I mean, that's just ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, if you have a company that's owned 50-50, your ownership interests should have the same value, but not with a partner like this. And then trying to negotiate that is just, it's mind-numbing. It's mind-numbing. And the only person who wins here is Larry the lawyer dealing with stuff like this. So don't get into that situation by partnering with somebody. Maybe they make a great buddy, but not a great business partner. Finally, this is going to seem heartless, and I apologize, but it's true, and you need to think about that. And that is, do they have the financial capability to be your partner? And you should, even if they're your best friend, you need to say, look, I need to see your financials. I need you to do a personal financial statement. I'm going to do the same thing so you can see it. And here's why. We are trying to identify, do you have some bad habits, financial habits that could affect the business? And you need to be aware if I do that, because you shouldn't partner with me if I have bad financial habits. And if you have those, I don't want to ruin our friendship because I'm a jerk to be a partner with. I don't want you to have bad financial habits. And so let's figure this out now before we ruin our friendship. Credit report would be helpful, but, are they paying their bills? Are they managing their debt load? Are they paying their taxes? Why is this important? It's because the business is money. And so if you run into problems, you might need to not pay yourself for a small period of time. When I first started my law firm, there were many times where I would have to forego a pay period. I just didn't pay myself one time because a client didn't pay me, or a big client, for whatever reason, wanted to pay over time, and I just didn't have the cash flow to pay myself. So your partners and yourself need to be able to weather the hard times. Also, surprise, surprise, businesses need cash sometimes. Maybe you need to buy an expensive asset, a truck, a trailer, maybe a building. And you need to do what's called a capital call. A capital call says all the owners need to put some money into the company so that we can have a deposit to buy that truck, or we can, make a deposit to whatever it is. So that means people need to have some money and resources to do that. And what happens if one of the partners does not have the money or ability to do that? Now what? So it creates some problems. So maybe you have the cash, but they don't. So you put in the money, they don't. Do you still have the same level of ownership? Do you get that money back? What happens if the company doesn't do so well? How do you get paid back? Or how do you account for the extra money you put into the company that your partner did not? That is the issue with financial responsibility, and being able to partner with people that have the ability to contribute at the level you have the ability to. It's almost like a weak link in a chain. The company is only going to be as strong as the weakest financial member or partner of the company. And so and this sounds cold and cold-hearted, but this is not, when you're talking about business and your livelihood, and you're talking about an asset that could be the most significant that you own, think about the weak links. Does that really make sense? So the final thing I want to talk about is victimhood. You know, and it should be, is he or she always a victim? That was me typing too fast last night. I am not trying to suggest anything that there's a gender bias here at all. I've seen it on both ends of the spectrum. But, you know, check references. It is appropriate to check references. And remember, past behavior is the best indicator of future behavior. And if you have somebody that is constantly critical of their previous employees, previous employers, and they can't take responsibility for their contributions to failures in relationships or why they may have moved on. One of my favorite things to do in an interview when I'm considering hiring employees, not even partners, is to just ask them, well, why did you leave here? Why did you leave here? And if it's always, you know, they were really mean, they didn't understand me, versus, well, it wasn't a good fit. You know, they wanted X and I was really looking for Y. That sounds like more of a collaborative person, less like a victim. But listen to their language. You know, is everybody against them? And if so, I promise you, they're going to be the victim against you. And they're going to, at some point, level just ridiculous accusations that you probably have no time for and would find extremely insulting. So avoid the victims. They're not going to change their behavior just because they like you or they like the business or the concept or the idea. Don't fall for that. People rarely change when they have these kinds of things. So remember, you know, do you get a hint that they're a bad partner? You work, they don't. They're gonna collect a check and do very little else for you. They might start the business and then move on with somebody else. They might, you know, habitually mismanage their personal affairs, and that could have negative consequences for your business. Are they making really bad decisions one after another? Do they lack professionalism? Substance abuse issues. Yeah. You know, I do feel for that. I do believe substance abuse is a disease, but it still affects your business. And we're talking about your most valuable asset. So I would not recommend partnering with people that have known substance abuse issues. I just, you know, I feel for them, but it's a problem that is going to be very hard for you to deal with. Are you dealing with somebody that maybe doesn't fight fair? Do they internalize things? Do they make things personal? If so, how do you collaborate with somebody? How do you share difficult issues? How do you have a nuanced discussion about how to move forward or make important decisions? So I'd like you to think of partners as a three-legged stool. If you take anything away, this is a very oversimplified view of what I just discussed. But I think there's three sort of components that makes a good partner. One is, do they have the hard skills? Do they have the technical or other chops to be the go-to person in the business? Do they directly contribute to what it is the business is doing? If you're a law firm, is the partner a good lawyer? You know, are they going to be a go-to person in their area of the law? If they're doctors or bakers or dog groomers, can they do a good job? And are they going to make the company look good? Do they have those hard skills? The problem is, a lot of people make decisions based on that alone, and that isn't the only issue. You have two other legs in a stool. You need three legs for the stool to stand. You remove any one of those legs, and the stool is going to fall over. Another leg is soft skills. Do they say good morning, please, and thank you? Do they greet customers and clients warmly? Do they give warm fuzzies? Or are they lacking warm fuzzies? You want somebody with good soft skills if they're going to be running a business. Why? Because a successful business rarely has a partner in a back room that doesn't come out and touch other important people that help the business succeed, whether those are vendors, employees, contractors, clients or customers. They're going to be touching somebody, and if they are not warm and friendly, they're going to be taking away from the business, in my opinion. And then finally, there's what I call a culture fit, the third leg. And the easy one is, are you somebody who burns the midnight oil? And if so, is the partner a 9-to-5er? And it may not be because of their fault. Maybe they have newborn children and they just want to be home with the kids more often and spend time with the kids, which is a great attribute, great family man or a great mother, and that's fine, but they're probably not going to be a great culture fit for your company if you are burning the midnight oil. Now, if you're all 9 to 5, you're 9 to 5, they're 9 to 5, then maybe that would work. But you need these 4 things, in my opinion, to have a successful partnership. So let me give you some quick real-world examples of what I've seen in the recent past. And these are clients. I can't go into too much detail, but this has happened. A violent child, a son forcefully removes his father by blocking him from the premises, forging the father's name on corporate documents. And before you know it, the father doesn't actually own anything. He's just been pushed out of the company, out of the bank accounts, out of everything. I mean, and it's the son, and it was the father's business. So the father knew about the son, but was trying to do the right thing and help the son, move into business and, become financially secure. And that's what the son ended up doing in return. Ganging up on the sick. We've seen issues where, partner, in this particular case, had serious COVID-19 symptoms and had to take off of work for a few months. And when he returns, doors are locked and partner's not willing to talk to him, and he's kind of shut out again. Also, he stopped getting paid, which was a whole nother thing. We've seen forced retirement where younger junior partners will gang up on an older member or a founding member, create a hostile work environment trying to hasten retirement. These are all real world problems that I've personally seen just within the past 6 to 12 months. The question is, how do you avoid nightmare scenarios like this? So let's talk about that. So now we're going to get into a little bit more detail on how to avoid these circumstances. And in order for you to understand how to avoid them, you need to understand that the law isn't here to protect you. Sure, violence, theft, embezzlement, although I've even seen situations like that, theft and embezzlement, where the other partner is like, I can't steal for myself. I give myself a distribution. So guess what? We're not arguing theft or embezzlement where we can get the district attorney's office or attorney general involved. We're arguing breach of contract because you gave yourself a distribution that I didn't get. Very different color and approach to that, and legal fees attached to that. So remember, the law is not there to help you. There's very little you can do in the face of bad behavior. It will be very difficult to remove a partner or enforce your rights under law. This is contract. Contract is going to be your friend here to protect you. And so that's why formation documents are so important. You should have the right partnership documents. And that means an operating agreement if you have an LLC, or bylaws for a corporation. Now, you also have potential optional documents like a buy-sell agreement. And that's to force a buyout under certain circumstances. Like, for example, I'm a lawyer, and if one of the partners, like myself, lost my legal license, it would be a problem for the firm. So the other partner would be able to buy me out if I lost my license automatically by contract. No fight, no, expensive legal fees. There's a formula. There's another thing called a restriction agreement, and that prevents transfers. For example, if I, wasn't a lawyer, let's say I, had a staffing agency and I wanted to sell my ownership interest to my wife. Well, if I have a corporation, I could probably do that unless I had a restriction agreement in place that said I cannot. Usually you'll see things like what's called an option where, a right of first refusal, so that if I did want to sell my ownership interest, I have to give the other partners, the right to buy that ownership interest from me before I sell it to somebody else. There's another one called a purchase agreement, and you see this a lot with like employees or other types of partners that you want the right to be able to buy back their ownership interest under certain circumstances, like their employment is terminated or they quit or something like that. So your documents, and if you already have your company and you already have documents, it wouldn't hurt to look at them and just run through some scenarios on my first or second page where I talked about what happens if. Does the language of your formation document cover these what if scenarios? And the first thing is you should have considered duties and responsibilities of partners and the consequences of not performing their duties and disassociation termination events and a dispute resolution process. Those are the big kind of clauses you'd like to see in a good partnership agreement. And every partnership agreement and every partnership is different. Everybody has their own needs and requirements, and that's fine. But make sure you address these issues if you can. And what would go into duties and responsibilities? Not Joe is going to open up at 9 o'clock every day. That's too specific. But what we care about are higher level things like duty of loyalty and non-compete. Is your partner required to work for your company full time? Or can they have other jobs? Can they open up other companies themselves? Can they partner with other people or not? You need to identify that in the partnership agreement. Otherwise, the answer is yes, they can do that. And there's nothing you can do about it. You should also have clauses around responsibilities and duties regarding avoiding conflicts. And what we mean here is conflict of interest. So for example, if your partner is in charge of vendors, we wouldn't want him or her to be selecting vendors that are owned by family members, for example, without maybe it getting approved, or defining what a conflict is, or defining arm's length transaction, fair market value kind of things. Nepotism is a big problem as well. You see a lot of disputes around nepotism because so-and-so wants to hire their daughter who is worthless, or, bring in a cousin who's violent or scares other good employees. It's amazing. A single drop of poison by one individual can infect so many other good employees in a company. And it often starts at the partnership level. You also have duties around capital call issues. And I talked about that earlier regarding financially responsible partners. And that's what a capital call is. So if the company needs to make a capital call, what does that look like? How does it make a capital call? Is it a majority vote? Is it a unanimous vote? If there's a capital call and somebody can't participate because they just not financially sound or can't do it at that time, then what? What does that look like? Do they lose some ownership interest? It needs to be written down and defined ahead of time. And what about behaviors, professional behaviors or bad behaviors, or all of a sudden they start drinking too much, or they show up, they're just enjoying the new recreational cannabis laws in New Mexico too much, or during work hours. You need to have some of these rules defined, and you need to have real world consequences for bad behavior. And that would include disassociation or terminating events would be the extreme example. What a disassociation or terminating event means is you're kicking somebody out. What does that look like? And death and incapacity is kind of the most common. And, heaven forbid if somebody dies, one question is, are you okay with having a new partner being the estate of the deceased partner, such as a wife or a child, whoever the beneficiaries of the estate are? In New Mexico, the default rule is you're doing business with the family. So you need specific language in your documents to do otherwise. Basically give you the right to buy out the estate. And I don't know about you, but there's very few businesses that I'm aware of that can just plunk down, $1 million for 50% of a $2 million business. You want additional language in there that allows you to pay over time, for example. Otherwise, there are insurance options. Buy, sell insurance. Also, don't forget about key man or key life, key person insurance, so that the business might have some cash. It's like a life insurance, term life insurance policy for key members of the company. That would give a cash injection to the company that would be the beneficiary of such a policy that would then allow you to have cash to either buy out the estate and or maybe use it as a bonus or something to get in a new partner or something else to help with the business. But there are other issues around disassociation and termination, like voluntary withdrawal, for example. Can a partner quit, just quit and leave, or not? The default rule in New Mexico is they can quit or leave. So maybe you don't want that. Maybe you don't want partners just to be able to walk away. Guess what? Because when the company's doing really well, you can't get rid of anybody. And then when a company is hard and all of a sudden there's debts and liabilities, I see partners just trying to leave all the time, and they're trying to leave from those debts and liabilities too. And can they do that? Can they not? How does that work? You need to have stuff spelled out in order to keep things fair for you and the other partners. And there is an issue with forced removal as well. Like, under what circumstances does an automatic removal occur? For me, if I lose my legal license in my law firm, I'm automatically removed. And now they got to buy me out and they pay me over some ridiculous time frame. I want to say it's 92 months, but it has to be an automatic thing given the professional licensure nature of this. But other businesses that don't have professional licensure, maybe you don't need forced removal, or maybe you do in certain circumstances. For example, like a divorce. There is language, if there's a divorce, the divorce court awards the ex-spouse some amount of ownership interest, that should trigger a forced immediate removal. And you can't just do that for $0, but you can define what that is. How do you calculate value of the company? There's I'm grossly simplifying, but two possible methods: book value, assets minus liabilities, versus fair market value. And usually fair market value is a lot more expensive than book value, but fair market value is the default. So if somebody has bad behavior or you want to kick out a spouse, if you have the right language in there, you might be able to do that for book value versus fair market value. So there's some real tangible financial benefits to you and the surviving partners if you have the right language in here in place. And yeah, I mentioned book value. I should have clicked my mouse to see book value versus fair market value. So that is the issue with formation documents. And of course, I would recommend you talk to a lawyer. But if you're not going to do that, fine. But then you need to try and be your own lawyer and look through these documents and make sure it has a lot of the right clauses and the clauses meet your needs and expectations. Let's talk about avoiding disputes quickly. And interestingly enough, this is going to look very similar to once you're in a dispute, what do? But, this is what you think it is. It's very similar to how do you maintain a healthy marriage, a healthy relationship with a significant other. You openly discuss expectations. You work together to make sure you're meeting those expectations, and you work together to modify them. You have meetings to discuss where things are at least once a quarter with the business. It should be monthly. You should be meeting monthly with your partners and looking at the financials and making sure you're not spending too much and making sure you're meeting your revenue targets. If you can't meet monthly, please, at least once a quarter. And you need to be respectful to your partners. After all, your livelihood depends on it, and you want to be respected as well. So if you want to be respected, you should return the favor and be respectful to your partners as well. And you need to think about your own behavior and how does that look to your partners, and how does that reflect how you want to be treated and the behavior you want your partners to emulate. You need to have the behavior that you want your partners to have. And even if they're not doing that, you need to do your best to try and be the example. And hopefully, you're always taking the high road and other people will follow you. The right partners will if you made the right decision. Finally, I want to mention SMART goals real quickly. They really help to define where the business is going. You can Google this, but basically SMART goals, it basically means, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely. You develop specific goals for the business that meet these particular attributes and get all the partners on board and then working together to try and meet these SMART goals, and then distill them down to individual SMART goals if possible. And I'm not going to go into a lot of time with that. We don't have a lot of time, but let's talk about dealing with disputes. And it's going to look a lot like how you get out of the company when it's time to throw in the towel. There's two big decision points here for Larry the lawyer talking to you, and that is, do you have a dispute resolution process in place within a partnership agreement? The flip side is you either do not have a partnership agreement at all, or you have no dispute resolution process. If you have a dispute resolution process in your partnership agreement, kudos to you. You follow the process. Consider, don't have to, but consider hiring legal counsel for advisement. Make sure you're aware of notice requirements. You can't just call an instantaneous vote unless everybody agrees to call an instantaneous vote. You may need to look at the formation, the process within your formation documents, and maybe you need to call a vote, and maybe you need to do a 30-day notice that you're going to have a meeting at such a place at such a time. You need to follow everything very clearly and carefully. Finally, well, not finally, you also need to put everything in writing and make sure verbal stuff is memorialized. Write it down, send it in an email, summarize it in an email, something, get it out. And so that way you don't have people repudiating that later saying, oh, I never agreed to that. Because you can send, it's strong proof. We could say, well, true, we didn't write this down, but we did send an email out dated such and such stating this, and you never replied to it, or you never came back to us and said you disagree, or no, that's not correct. So now the presumption is that it's true. Our assertion that it was agreed to actually was true, and we can usually enforce that. Of course, violence is never acceptable, nor is the threat of violence. So if you're somebody that's that kind of person, you need to stop it. That is never acceptable. And if you're somebody on the receiving end, you do not have to put up with that. This is where the police get involved. You need to separate yourself. You need to remove yourself. You can certainly stand up for yourself and stand up for your rights and protect your assets, but not to the point of violence. That will never work. Now, I'm not trying to, I'm not a gun enthusiast. I can't tell you what the gun laws are in the state are, but when you start dealing with violence, you move from civil fights to potential criminal activity. Police are going to get involved. Police will not get involved if it's a civil matter, if there's a dispute with the contract, but they'll certainly get involved when somebody's whipping out a gun or making threats of violence. If you do not have a partnership agreement or you don't have a dispute resolution process, you don't have a process to follow. There's nothing in law that's going to be very helpful here for you on a dispute resolution process, but don't despair. You do need to hire legal counsel for advisement versus considering hiring legal counsel. And you should always take the high road because that makes you look good. Heaven forbid if we have to go to court. But you need to protect your investment. Stay true to your business. Document everything. Remember my comments about violence. Never acceptable. But don't retreat. If somebody's being pushy and trying to take stuff, don't fall back. Protect yourself. Record stuff. Whip out your phone and take video of what's going on. But retreat for your safety. Never put yourself in harm's way if you can avoid it. But I want to warn you, never just walk away from your business and never walk away from defending yourself or your business. Now, let's talk about, that was dispute resolution. Now let's talk about how to terminate a partnership. And this looks very similar, and it is very similar. The big question is, do we have a dissolution protocol in our partnership agreement versus no partnership agreement or no dissolution protocol? It's very similar to the other one. Consider hiring legal counsel. You don't have to because you can follow the process. Be aware of your notice requirements. Put everything in writing. Remember my comments about violence. Follow the protocol. Negotiate. What are its assets? What are the debts? What are the liabilities? Who's doing what? How are you sharing them? Discuss all of that, and hopefully you follow the process, and there's not going to be a lot of legal fights. There's not going to be a lot of fighting at all. Notify people as appropriate. Execute the protocol, follow the protocol, document things, and you shouldn't go wrong. On the other side, we have a very similar process as the other one. You really should hire legal counsel. You need to understand what your legal options and remedies may be. Do not do this on your own. For the love of God, don't ChatGPT it. I get a different answer every time I type something into ChatGPT. Honestly, it's like having a high school freshman give me an answer. You know, it sounds good. It's kind of right in theory, but it lacks nuance. It lacks sophistication. It lacks legal precision. It will get you in trouble. You really have to hire a lawyer. Again, always take the high road, protect your investment, stay true to the business, keep it operating as much as you can, because that's where the value is. Document everything. Remember my comment about violence. Don't retreat unless you have to. And again, never just walk away. You never, ever want to do that. You always have to get this down on paper. What you want is a solid date in the sand when either you left the company or your partner left the company, for both your protection. If you stay in the company and they leave, we don't want them coming back, claiming they weren't paid, they are owed more money, or the company becomes really successful and they still think they own 50% of it, and vice versa. If you leave and then your partner does something stupid like get into more debt, start forging your name on stuff, you want a document that says, no, nice try. I left on this date. All the trouble you got the company in, you didn't pay the gross receipts tax, you didn't pay income tax, you didn't pay withholding, that's on you. And you have a document to protect yourself on something like that. So never just walk away from a business. You have to have that written down. And so that is the conclusion of my talk. I really appreciate your time. I hope you got something out of this. My contact information is here. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them for you. And hopefully, honestly, I don't hear from you. I hope you don't run into these problems, and I hope you aren't one of my clients that has to deal with this. Not because I don't want to make money and pay for my expensive car. It's because I don't want you to have to deal with it. It's just debilitating and financially and personally destructive. So I hope that is not you. But if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, contact me, and it was a pleasure giving this talk.
Thank you so much, Larry.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was just laughing while I was hearing it. Violence is not okay. I was like, I thought that was common sense, but I guess it's not if you kept repeating it many times.
Oh, I've had people come and threaten me, and
Oh my
and they
goodness.
have no idea who I am, and but oh yeah, I'm just
Yeah, you
no
just think
time
it's
for it.
common sense, but I guess it's not. So I really appreciate all of this information, and even just, for people who are just thinking about getting into partnerships, making real, good choices before they get into this, basically, marriage with somebody long term. So very good. I don't know if there's any questions from the group. Feel free to add it to the chat. There's a lot of thanks for the work you've been doing. I guess they know you. Hope you're doing well. Very good. Very good. Well, we really appreciate everyone's time. Again, this will be recorded, so feel free to go back and watch it at any time. And thank you, everyone. Have a great day.